Well, we're wrapping up this course, and I'm going to do a quick review over some of the content that we covered throughout this course. We kicked this course off with talking about what is a computer. We got into the different functions of a computer. There's an input, we process things, and there's an output. There's also this storage component when it comes to computers. I gave lots of examples of different inputs, different outputs, and different components of the computer, and how it all comes together to give us some sort of functionality. And of course, a critical piece of computers is the software side of it. So we talked about software and how software played a role in computers. We even went as far as categorizing software into system software and applications. From the system software perspective, we got into what is operating system, we talked about drivers, and we talked about utilities. And we got more in depth into each one of those. For instance, drivers are a critical part of how our computer operates because it is the go-between between our operating system and the hardware of the computer. From there, we started looking at how computers work and how it actually does its calculations. We got into what are transistors, what are integrated circuits, what are microprocessors, and how have those things shaped how we do computing nowadays and changed over time. And we started looking into how we could build out a calculator using these little micro switches. And we talked about the different types of gates, how we have AND gates, OR gates, NOT gates, and how they work together to create some sort of circuitry that performs some sort of calculation. From there, we started creating this great foundation of how these little ones and zeros get calculated on that back end. So then we started applying, well, how do we represent different aspects of our everyday, things like characters, words, how we represent graphics? How do we represent all of that using these ones and zeros, using these bits? So we discussed the powers of 2 and how we can create some sort of digital representation using these powers of 2. And we talked about how did we measure bits? What is a kilobit? What's a kilobyte? What's a megabit? What's a megabyte? And then we also talked about how there are different measuring systems out there, whether it's the International System of Units or binary prefixes. We got into Unicode and ASCII and how these systems will correlate between bit representation and an actual character. And we got into how these bits represent the amount of color, how much red, how much green, and how much blue each individual pixel has, and how we can save a bitmap on our screen, which is many different pixels with the different color variations, and how we could actually calculate what is the size of that file going to be. We talked about those 2 different graphic formats, whether it be raster or vector formats, and we got into processing bits, and how we've also hit a plateau in our CPU speeds. And so we've had to come up with other ways to continually process more information, even though that we're reaching these limits from a speed perspective of those CPUs. Then we started digging into what computes. We looked at a lot of different hardware and actually broke some of it apart to see what's on the inside of it. So we took a look at a lot of different computers, things like mainframes and PCs and Macs. We talked about what is a terminal. We got into a laptop, we got into a tablet, we got into a phone system, smartphones. And for each one of those, we created a little note card to talk about what are the pros, what are the cons, what vendors are out there, what's the purpose of them, what's some OS examples that go onto this equipment, or does it take firmware? We talked about even gaming consoles and virtual reality and augmented reality and what those are. And of course, all of the different devices of the Internet of Things and how we are taking just standard household appliances and things that typically were not networked in the past, and now we're networking them to give them extra functionality. Congratulations, you've made it through the course. You are a completer, so good on you for that. And so hopefully now you have this great understanding of what computers are and how we use them on a day-to-day basis. That you can build off of this in any future courses or getting into your IT career because you have this solid foundation of what computers are.